A short while ago, I visited Japan with a group of friends. Now I've promised a couple of other friends that I'd do a little video about it, so here it go! We stayed in the district of Ikebukuro, and we stayed in a pretty ordinary block of flats, but out of the window, we had this building. It's called Hotel Zebra, and it looks a lot like a giant computer. Like, you could see those lights running around at night. It was actually pretty cool. Ikebukuro is a pretty big entertainment district, so a lot of it looks like this. There's lots of bright lights, loud music, and just fashionable people about. It's exactly the sort of thing you think of when people talk about urban Japan. This little shrine was outside our apartment. It was a surprisingly quiet spot, and my friends and I enjoyed eating lunch there when we decided to head out for the day. In Akihabara, which is about 5 minutes away on the train from our apartment, there were hundreds of arcades and video game themed stores. And this one is where I own most of the stuff that I took home. Oh, and there's a lot of stuff. For example, this was one of the Crane games, and it's a good example of why I like Japan's arcades over the English ones. Because this one game has Hello Kitty, Doraemon, Kirby, that weird, sad egg-looking thing. I mean, no reason. They just had a cross-promotion between these four things. There's also a promotion in Akihabara where you can play real-life Mario Kart and drive a little go-kart around the actual roads. I mean, it's kind of hard to see in this picture because they were driving past, but there's a guy dressed as Mario in one of these karts. Now, if you can't win the prizes with ease, you can go to a prize shop like this one, which has pretty much all of the current season's prizes for sale. I mean, it's usually pretty reasonable too. I paid 1,000 yen for a figure. That's about $10. And I would have spent way more than that trying to win it for myself. Near to our house was a supermarket. And most of the stuff was Japan only, but to my surprise, I found Spam. Including teriyaki Spam. And it had the serving suggestion of Spam sushi, which I never tried, but doesn't that look appealing? It does to me. This building is Suzuya, a second-hand shop that we passed on the train every day. The shimmering panel down the center is actually a waterfall. I think it looks really good. We also passed a lot of signs for musicals. Here's one for The Little Mermaid and The Lion King. And this one is for Sister Act. And I like how you can tell who is supposed to be playing what role, even if you can't read Japanese. Like, the actress playing Whoopi Goldberg's part is spot on. This is Animate, an 8-story building not too far from our apartment. And now, every floor in this building was set aside for some aspect of anime culture. So you'd have stuffed toys, figures, boys' books, girls' books, all sorts of stuff like that. And we spent a lot of time and money in stores like this one. Also near to our apartment was this bizarre statue with some musical notation on it. And I'm not sure what the tune is exactly, but I feel that if I play it on a flute, a secret door will open up somewhere, you know? One day, we took a train out to Venus Fort, which is a shopping plaza in Odaiba. Now, this picture was taken on our way out, and it accidentally includes some of the most Japanese things. There's a Apache slot parlor, a karaoke bar, and a capsule hotel. And here is why we went to Venus Fort. It is a life-sized Gundam. Like, it is hard to express just how tall this thing is. I mean, as tall as the mall behind it, you can hopefully see that. Oh, and look at that handsome man! What's he doing in this slideshow? Weird. One part of Venus Fort was done up to look like an Italian plaza. And in this section, the sky was projected onto the ceiling, so that no matter what time of the day you visited, it was always a warm dusk. And they also had a pretty neat fountain. I don't know why, but I love a nice, ornate little fountain. We didn't get to go there, because we spent too much time shopping, but there was a gigantic Ferris wheel in the distance. Now, even though it was colourful and blaring death metal music, it actually looked really peaceful. Oh, and for another idea of how big the Gundam is, check out this shot of it checking out the horizon. It actually moves too, and they have a special display every couple of hours where it does that. This device is called a bogie, and basically it's the wheels that go underneath a train carriage. I took a picture of this one outside Odaiba Station because we have the very same model in my hometown, and it's very nice to be reminded of home in a very specific way. And this is a station on the way back to the apartment. It was interesting to see a familiar sight in a new light like this. This is Takeshita Street in Harajuku. Now, Harajuku is Fashion Town, and that's more obvious here than anywhere else. It's also incredibly busy, as you can see. An interesting thing about Harajuku Station, they refurbished it at some point, but left the original platform in place, rather than demolishing it. So this way, you've got something for nature to take over, and it's a means of keeping animals away from the tracks. This is the store Bic Camera, which sells pretty much everything but cameras, ironically. The camera shop was across the street. Like, it's behind me in this picture. I like the huge phone on the side of this building, but I thought Japanese tech was meant to be smaller than in the West. And I bet I'm the only person to ever do that joke. For some reason, Shaun the Sheep was all over Japan when we visited. Like, I have no idea why an English kids show has exploded in popularity over there, but here he is. And these are gashapon machines. These things are everywhere in Japan. Like street corners, convenience stores, bookshops, arcades, restaurants, everywhere has these little machines. And for a couple of hundred yen, just $1 or $2, you get a little figure of some kind. And I bought so many of these little trinkets. Like, my favourite one is this badass Squirtle and Substitute doll. I didn't get Deadpool from Japan, although we did see him cruising the streets. One day, my friends and I went to a sumo tournament. This is obviously not that, this is just a nice flower bed that we passed on our way there. And we also passed this building. We couldn't work out what it was, but my running hypothesis is that this is a Dragon Zord, waiting dormant beneath the ground until it's needed to defend Japan once again. Actually, at the tournament now, from what we could tell, these banners represented the fighters who would be participating in the tournament. Oh, and a fun thing, we went to McDonald's before the tournament, and we ended up sitting beside two of the wrestlers who we later saw competing. Now, this was the first stadium sporting event that I had ever been to, and even though my friends and I were really far back, it really didn't matter. I mean, we could see things unfold just as well as we needed to, and we could still feel the electric atmosphere in the building. Oh, and also look at this! This is a school trip to a sumo tournament. My school never took me on trips to, like, huge events like this one. We went to, like, the Potteries. This is the final bracket, the Yokozuna ranked entrance. Sumo has a lot of traditions that have to be followed, and, well, this is one of them. The entrants in each class coming out to greet one another before the fights begin proper. Along the ceiling of the arena were massive prints like these, and each one showed winners of previous tournaments. Overall, I'd say this was a really good day, and I'm glad that I got to go. I would happily go again if the opportunity came up. Halfway through the trip, my friends and I went to Fuji-Q Amusement Park, which sits, as you might expect, quite close to Mount Fuji. Now, the weather was great on the day that we went, so you got to see Mount Fuji really clearly. And that's a rarity, since it's often hidden in fog. And that's why it's sometimes called the Shy Mountain. Now, the queues were really long, no matter what ride you wanted to go on, so the theme park provided scratch pads and pens, so you could leave a message for the people behind you. I think that's a really cute idea. Oh, and another cute idea is they would show you a video of the roller coaster that you were queuing for. However, because the park mascots were a bunch of guys wearing full face masks, they didn't actually react to the roller coasters. At all. Like, it was a funny bit when Mr. Bean did it, it's funny when these guys did it. Trivia time! You can tell that this is a non-European carousel because it is moving counterclockwise. And because it's in a Japanese theme park, but mostly that first thing that I said. Now, they had a Thomas the Tank Engine section for the kids, And I took a picture of the flyer because look how intense the Fat Controller looks in this picture. He's just so happy to be here. Oh, and speaking of trains, this is the station outside the theme park. In its entirety. Now, there's no hidden terminal behind the cameras or anything, it's just this bit of tarmac next to some houses. And that was so weird to me, given how big and grand the theme park was. On our way back to Ikebukuro, we passed plenty of graveyards like this one. And it's a pretty morbid thought, I suppose, but I think it looks really pretty. We didn't go to any defunct railway tracks or an abandoned factory, so we couldn't complete the amateur trifecta, but we did well. We did well. One day, we did some urban exploration, and it was another really interesting thing to do because of how different everything was, both compared to what I am familiar with and within the same city. For example, this is not a fracture in time, this is actually the entrance to Tokyo Plaza, a mall. And this unassuming cute little alleyway is literally down the street from the Tokyo Plaza. I mean, one of the things I liked most about Japan is that you could go down little alleyways like this one and find a cozy little shop tucked away in the corner. Because you go down an alleyway in England, you find yourself, like, on the list of the deceased in the news. Later, we took the bullet train to Osaka. And this is one of the canals that runs through the city, which means that despite being near to the equator, in the middle of summer, the place was actually pretty cool. Oh, and speaking of pretty cool, when we were in Osaka, we cooked one of my favorite recipes, okonomiyaki. Man, I have missed using that intro. Okay, so first off, source your materials. This sign was in the front of the restaurant we went to, and it shows where in Japan all the ingredients came from. And that's a really cute touch. Now, step 1. You'll be presented with a bowl containing all the ingredients required to make your okonomiyaki. In this case, I went for the cheese and vegetable kind. Step 2. Mix your ingredients together in the bowl and divide it into little pancakes on the grill in front of you. After they've had a chance to brown, flip them over. Feel free to add sauce at this point to give them a nice crisp texture. As they're grilling, flip your pancakes a couple more times until both sides are nice and brown. Then, forget that you're meant to be taking pictures of your food cooking, eat it all, and instead take a picture of somebody else's okonomiyaki so you have something to show off in your eventual YouTube video. I mean, it doesn't look at all appealing, I will admit that, but it is absolutely delicious, and if you get the chance, I advise trying it. Back in Osaka, we went shopping and found this pretty display of the mall's biggest fan! Yes, I'm going to do that gag every time I see something like this. Sue me. Oh, and we also found a McDonald's, because it's everywhere. Now, as it was explained to me, you are welcome to take one of these umbrellas if it's raining, on the understanding that you bring it back when you're done. And if so, that's a really good idea, because it makes people's journeys more convenient, and it's getting them back into McDonald's. I mean, you could never do that in England. This stuff would be on eBay before the day ended. You see a lot of stuff like this when you see Japan on TV, like huge neon signs, bustling streets, and so on. It's not just Ikebukuro. This was on our way back to our hotel in Osaka. Also, don't think I don't see you in the bottom left corner, Siren. Also, on the way back to the hotel, we found a couple of apartment blocks that looked like this. I've mentioned it before, in this very video, even, but I love seeing it when nature takes over. And this is an apartment that someone is actually living in too, they like the greenery. This shrine was directly outside our hotel. Sadly, it was closed, both when we arrived and left, but it struck a chord with me to see such an unassuming and spiritual place just all over the place in Japan. Something else I noticed in Japan, the wildlife just does not care that there are colossi stomping around the place. Case in point, at Hiroshima bus terminal, this guy came up to say hello. Like, right up to say hello. Possibly because I was eating melon bread, but still, I liked it. It's a different atmosphere to England for sure. We did visit Hiroshima on our way to somewhere else, but we figured you can't go there without also going to the Peace Memorial. Now, ironically, this was the day before President Obama's visit, so security was really tight. Like, we were counting snipers on rooftops, it was so tight. This clock counts the number of days since the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. That's the top counter. And the bottom one counts the number of days since the last nuclear test conducted around the world. Now, this device is, apparently, rigged with explosives, and if ever the world reaches nuclear annihilation, the first thing that will happen is that this clock will detonate. This monument is in the middle of the Peace Memorial. The time is set at 8:15, the time the bomb was dropped, and the rockery is made from actual debris from the attack. And speaking of, the Hiroshima Dome survived the bombing, and it remains standing to this day. It serves as a centerpiece for the whole complex. We passed through Hiroshima on our way to Miyajima Island, and it's that giant landmass in the background of this picture. Now, the reason we went to Miyajima is because it's got lots of deer, and you can just walk right up to them and pet them. And you can do this because the deer are roaming free. In fact, if you don't walk up to them, they will walk up to you to get a petting. I mean, they will also walk up to the food hut. I'm pretty sure that's what this is. This was my room on Miyajima. It might not look like much, but it was the most comfortable night's sleep I have ever had. Possibly because, while I was here, I was talking to the work group chat on Facebook about how I wasn't going to be able to cover anybody's shift that weekend. We went back to the beach at low tide, and it is littered with coins that people have thrown through the Torii Gate for luck. Now, each of these coins is 100 yen, about $1, and it was amazing to me that nobody was picking them up. Because this would not happen in England. People would steal this as soon as look at it. Interestingly, the restaurants closed fairly early on Miyajima, because the owners would then go down to the beach and collect the ingredients for the following day. And this woman is collecting shellfish. If only I could be so grossly incandescent. Sadly, this is the best I could do. Now, Miyajima has a series of little waterways running through the walkways. And I'm not sure what they are there for, because they're too shallow for transporting stuff. I think they might just be there for the deer to drink from. Now, this massive pagoda is in the forests surrounding the ferry port. And I thought this was the pagoda from the video game The Dream Emulator, but it isn't. Although we did find that pagoda, actually. But we'll get to that just a little bit later on. This is one of my favourite pictures from the entire trip, and I did it entirely accidentally. Also, at the foot of this Torii Gate is the ruck of 100 yen coins that we saw a couple of pictures ago. Now, these are the street lights, traffic signs, and street signs around Miyajima. And I love how stylized and angular they are. And when I talk about little touches that Japan has compared to the rest of the world, it's stuff like this, you know? On a later date, we went to Kyoto. There were a lot of people wearing yukata about the city, and it was just wonderful to see it. In the entrance to the train station, there's a little carousel of the clothes that you can buy in the city. And my favourite one is that purple one, because that is something straight out of Mulan right there. I mean, the rest of the station was pretty good looking too. I will admit I'm a sucker for intricate architecture. While in Kyoto, we made a trip to the Fushimi Inari Shrine. That's where the kitsune live, don't you know? In fact, this one is waiting for you when you first arrive. It's a very popular shrine, both with the locals and the tourists, so it was full of people. And there were a couple of school trips there too, which was very interesting to see. Now, the shrine itself is a 2-hour walk up a mountain, and you have to pass through hundreds of Torii gates to get to it. Which leads me to this picture, which is my other favourite photo from my trip. I mean, I have to admit though, the Dutch angle was entirely accidental. Almost all of the Torii gates at the Fushimi Inari Shrine have written characters on the back. And at first, I wondered if this was to do with purification, since the idea behind Torii gates is that evil spirits can't pass through them. but I later learned that these characters are the names of the people who funded the construction of each particular gate. Now, there is one big long road up to the Fushimi Inari Shrine. However, if you step off the path, you can find some other, smaller shrines, like this one. Now, there were no signs, Japanese or English, to explain what this was, so I figured this is probably where the secret boss fight takes place. Because look at it, that is some Fatal Frame nonsense right there. A little further off the path, we found this destroyed shack. Now, the creepiest thing of all is that, as we explored, we found a stack of the previous day's newspapers. Now, suffice to say, we booked it out of there pretty damn quick once we found that. There were also a lot of feral cats on the path to the shrine. I mean, I assume they were feral, they were just hanging out, just chilling. Women and cats will do as they please, as the saying goes. There is an old belief in Japan which says that if you make 1,000 origami cranes, you will get one wish for good health. At the Hiroshima Peace Memorial, you can learn about a girl called Sadako, who survived the initial bombing, but who succumbed to radiation poisoning later in life. While she was in the hospital, Sadako tried to make 1,000 origami birds, but died before she could complete the task. And this story prompted the whole of Japan to make origami cranes in her honor. And that's what this is. Thousands and thousands of origami cranes just to be sent and displayed at the Hiroshima Peace Memorial. As a brief aside, origami is everywhere in Japan as well. Like the Passport Control Office had a lot of it decorated on the walls, as did the Train Information Office, seen here. Later, still in Kyoto, we took a trip to another shrine, Ginkakuji, the Silver Pavilion. And it was a lot more peaceful and understated than the Fushimi Inari Shrine, and it was a welcome change of pace, given that Kyoto is just full of people and bustling with activities. Now, hands up, who knows what this is? Now, it's a beautiful scene, yes, but the pagoda on the right is the pagoda from LSD, the Dream Emulator. And this is a Zen garden from the same title. Now, I didn't set out to go to the setting of that weird little video game, it's just a wild coincidence that I did. Oh, and these kids in the background are pretty cool too. The first one bowed and said hello, so I said hello in turn. So every child in that group then bowed and said hello as they passed. And again, it was a really nice little moment that you wouldn't get in England. Now, there is no hidden meaning to this picture, it's just a little rock holding down the tourist information leaflets, but it tickled me no end, and I don't know why. I mean, even now I'm having a bit of a giggle. It's just a rock in the Zen garden. It's just, it's great. Now, as with the beach at Miyajima, people were donating coins, and nobody was taking them. Presumably, they are collected by the shrine staff at some point, but again, it made me happy to see all the coins left like this, because once again, in England, somebody would be in there. Now, this picture accurately sums up one of my favourite things about Japan. We were in the middle of a beautiful, scenic, and mostly silent garden, but if you look to the right, you can see a busy metropolis. In Kyoto, we stayed in a traditional Japanese house, like paper walls and everything. No word of a lie, it was the most uncomfortable night's sleep I have ever had, including that one time at Dragon Con where we got 13 people into a single occupancy room. Later, while visiting Shinjuku, we saw Godzilla towering over the train tracks. Now, weirdly, when we went to find him, he wasn't there. How on earth did we miss this? And I have no idea. Also, on our way back to Ikebukuro, I noticed this. There are platforms beneath the platforms, so the train staff can get from A to B without disturbing the commuters. What a handy way of doing things. Now, in Kyoto, I ended up going to the site of LSD, the Dream Emulator. But this was not the only video game that I ended up visiting. Narita Airport is in Sega Super GT. I went to the Pastry Cafe from Catherine, And this is part of Shibuya-cho from Jet Set Radio. It was amazing and surreal at the same time to just be in a video game. Oh, and speaking of video games, we spent a lot of time riding the trains, and each cabin has several video screens running adverts for local businesses. Nintendo has bought advertising time on these screens, but instead of running adverts, Isabelle from Animal Crossing comes out and talks to you about eating healthily, or local events, or history, or stuff like that. It was brilliant. Near to our apartment is a building called Milky Way Cafe, and their speciality is 13 different ice cream sundaes, one for each sign of the extended zodiac. And it was great. I didn't need to read the menu or anything. I just sat down and said, I'm Aquarius, that is what I will have. It actually wasn't half bad. Now, if you can believe it, this restaurant is packed. Now, my friends and I had a hard time hearing one another. This restaurant was so busy. Now, the reason you can't see anyone is because we're all in little pits just off the main corridors. That was really cozy. Oh, and speaking of food, this was the very first thing that I ordered in Japanese. Now, I will admit that I cheated because it was mostly English words, meron to cantarupu no frappuccino, but it still counts. And as I mentioned, we also visited McDonald's because, dude, you have to. You're in a foreign country, you want to see how the home comforts stack up to where you're from, right? And the answer is overwhelmingly better than anything we have in England. Like, here is a Matcha McFlurry, which is amazing. Now, one of the big things in the arcades was card-based dueling. You put a card with an NFC chip into the arcade machine, and your characters react in the game itself. It's a really clever little system. If you buy a Happy Meal, you get an exclusive power-up for one of these games. Dragon Ball Z for the boys, or a Pop Idol game, also for the boys, because who are we kidding, they were the ones playing those games. I didn't get a card. I got a dog instead. It's a little sheep, and it bobs its head if you tap it. Now, I also tried Sakura Pepsi. It tasted like medicine, but in all the right ways. Like, imagine drinking Red Bull, except instead of tasting like anxiety, it had more of a citrus kick to it. As I mentioned, we did a lot of shopping, and I felt legitimately bad that I couldn't afford some of it, like this exclusive Bullet Train Lego set. I felt less bad when I was able to speak Japanese and ask where stuff was. For example, Doko ga shi narengo desu ka got me these, a collection of CDs and DVDs from my favorite Japanese artist. And some Taiko Drum Master games. Now, the stuff in this picture cost me $5 total, which is insane. It costs more than that to ship one of these things if you go through Amazon or CD Japan. Crazy. Oh, and speaking of crazy, here is everything that I bought while I was out there. I don't know how I managed to get it all home, but I am glad that I did. Oh, and speaking of crazy, what trip to Japan would be complete without totally bonkers game shows? I'm not entirely sure what was going on in this show, but I think that sums up my trip pretty well. I'm not entirely sure what's going on, but I am having a great time doing it. And that, my dear patient viewers, is a fairly quick rundown of the time I spent in Japan. Honestly, I could talk about this for hours and hours. There is so much that I haven't shown or talked about, but these are stories for another time, I think. I will certainly be going back, though. I mean, hopefully with a more expedient recap video next time, because it only took me a year to get round to doing this. But, well, again, that is a story for another time. And until next time, goodbye!